So we are talking all about remote design sprints. We are really excited to welcome Breyna, who is the Associate Design Director at Frog, and our friends Iris and Kevin from Miro. So welcome, folks.
Welcome, everybody. So I'll kick us off and talk a little bit about Frog, what remote design sprints have looked like for us in the last 8 or so weeks. And then we'll talk a little bit about the tools that we use and how we've been leveraging Miro to seamlessly collaborate in this weird time in the world. So again, my name is Breyna. I'm an Associate Design Director at Frog. I've been at Frog on and off for about the last 7 years. And I have a deep desire to make things real in the world. So if you know anything about Frog, we're a global innovation and strategy firm. But when I came back to Frog, I really came back to specialize in product delivery and really focus on that detailed design phase of our work and how we can bring products to life with our clients. The other reasons this is very important to me, especially right now, is one, I've been actively leading a product to an MVP launch as we've transitioned into a remote working environment. And the other is that I am immunocompromised and I have a high risk for contracting and being seriously ill from COVID. So I am not only pregnant, but I also have an underlying health condition that just puts me at a higher risk. So I know for me, this is going to be a little bit longer term of a solution that we really need to figure out in order to successfully deliver with our clients. So I hope you've gotten a chance to join some other talks by my fellow frogs and know a little bit about our company. But if not, like I mentioned, we're global innovation and strategy. We do a lot of visionary work, but we also launch a lot of products and ventures. And so in the last 5 years, Frog has helped our partners launch over 50 new products and ventures. And so one of the things that we really pride ourselves on and helps us launch these products is that we're very human-centered, we're very action-oriented, and we're highly collaborative. And so when I say human-centered, I not only mean human-centered and user-centered and focusing on the end user to create the best experience, but I also mean human-centered in the way that we formulate our teams and formulate our relationships within the office in order to deliver the best product. So our physical collaboration is really important to us. And so that's why this has become a really interesting time. So if you see in some of these photos, we do a lot of face-to-face collaboration. We're making prototypes. We're constantly at the whiteboard. We're throwing things up all over the walls around us so that when we enter these team rooms, as we call them, you feel like you're immersed in the product. And that, again, is just super important to us. The other thing that we do a lot of is we rearrange our desks in the office so that we can sit in a multiple disciplinary fashion. And so you'll see our development team sitting right next to our design team, right next to our design researcher, so that we can collaborate in real time much quicker. And there's no communication barriers because everyone is face to face. So as you can tell, this just makes for an interesting environment as we transition out of that. And we'll talk about that shortly. But as it relates to design sprints, Frog has really developed a workflow that marries design ops and DevOps into a single kind of process. And so you can see here, if you're a product designer, you're probably very familiar with this process. We're, constantly going back and forth at Frog between those designers, the developers, the product managers, people like Christina, if you were able to join her talk yesterday. But what I want to focus on today is really more of the design portion of that. And so for the most part, design is kind of focused more upfront. And then we hand off to development. And so a lot of times what we're doing here and our design sprints is we are staggering our workflows so that design is kind of working pretty much 2 weeks ahead of development. And most of the time at Frog, we're working in about 2 to 3 week design sprints. And I know there's a lot of different sprint philosophies out there. But for us, we really work in about 2 to 3 week increments so that we can bite off a chunk of work that we know that can be developed in a relatively close to the same amount of time. And so when I take those steps from this slide and I explode them, we really have, I'll call it 5 steps, one being step 0, that we go through in order to deliver the products that we're designing. So the first step doesn't happen too often. It's usually what we do up front, but we're discussing who is the team, what are the norms, what are the tools that we're using. Then we go through, and this is kind of more of the cyclical process of the sprint for us. So we're doing a lot of alignment and planning. We're reviewing the goals that we set out in the first place. We're gathering facts. This is where we're rechecking our backlog. We're often having face-to-face collaboration sessions with our clients, working with their subject matter experts to really understand the goals and the requirements for the product. Then we go back to the drawing board. We do some sketching, some wiring. We visualize the facts that we learned about the product. We start wireframing out our flows and we iterate like crazy. Then we go into a phase where we review that with them and we test. So often what we're doing is we're testing with a potential user and using that time within the sprint to go back and iterate again if necessary, just validating our findings, validating the design. And then finally, we're polishing that and we're sharing it with the development team. So we do a lot of component building, we do a lot of DLS library building, and then we share that out with development. Sometimes that development team is in-house with Frog, and sometimes it's with our clients. And so with that, as I mentioned, being highly collaborative, loving being face-to-face with our teams and with our clients, really the question that's, obvious, right, is how do we continue to achieve that collaboration and that seamless handoff in this remote environment that we're forced to be in? So really, I've learned 2 things in the last 9 weeks that I've been working remote. One is process is really fueling progress. And I know a lot of people like the term progress over process. And I do believe a lot of that is true, right? We don't want to set too many processes in place that hinder us from getting to progress and creating something efficiently. But at the same time, right now, we need to lay some sort of foundation for our teams to build off of and to understand this new way of working. And the second thing I've learned is that we need to balance our high expectations with a high level of empathy. And so I am known at Frog for having high expectations with my teams, and learning that transitioning to this remote environment, we're intermingling, as you can see, you're in my house right now. But we are intermingling what it looks like to have our work life and our home life and sharing so much more of our life with our coworkers. And so what I mentioned is that we really just need to build this foundation for success. And so for today, I want us to really talk about what it looks like to set the stage and how setting that stage with our teams, with our clients, with our tools can really help us go through this design sprint process much more efficiently. And thankfully, we have a ton of tools in our tool belt these days in design that allow us to collaborate through the sprint process fairly seamlessly, as long as everyone knows where to look, right? We want to just make sure that we're setting a direction that makes sense for everyone, that everyone knows when are we using Slack and when are we using Figma and when are we using Miro. So I have kind of 3 points here that I'll run through, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how to do this together. So the first one is, what are the challenges your team members are facing? And so you can see in this that bottom left is my husband and I sharing our house as our office. You can see there's a lot of people at Frog who have dogs who are asking for a lot of attention, as well as folks that have kids. And so just coming to terms and recognizing that there are a lot of obstacles in front of us There are mothers that need to balance taking care of their children with working throughout the day. And just calling attention to that and recognizing that we may not be able to work in the same cadence as we have in the past. The next is the tools, right? So Frog is very tool agnostic. We adapt our toolkit based on the needs of our client or the tools that our client wants to use. But we also come to them with a lot of suggestions for tools when they don't know where to look. And so we have been looking to the tools to kind of augment, right, that face-to-face and real-time collaboration. And so really for me personally, in the last 8 weeks, these are the 3 tools that I've been most excited about. Miro has been tremendously helpful for us as we recreate the team room in a digital space. We've been using Notion for our backlog as well as our just kind of getting on the same page about our weekly goals and tasks, using it kind of as a Kanban board. And then Figma has been tremendously helpful as we communicate back and forth with our clients. We've been leveraging that commenting feature in Figma with our clients to communicate back and forth about requirements, which has been awesome. And so combining those first 2, right? Like, who is the team and what are our norms? What are our tools, into understanding what is the new normal. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit more about how we leverage Miro to create this digital team room. And so we have about 3 teams in Austin right now who are deep in sprints and have kind of taken a step back to kind of realize what the new normal is and use Miro to do that. And so you can see in some of these pictures here in the bottom right, I think this is hilarious. I don't know why Dolly Parton is in here, but it's great. They have created this space in Miro for everyone to kind of write down these different ideas of what normal looks like. So they have on here anything from like health and wellness, like respect 12 to 1 as everyone's going to take a break, or make sure you eat lunch or go outside, to how to communicate with each other. So like, I'm down to call or directly communicate with your collaborators instead of spanning the whole channel. Another thing that we've been doing is using Slack statuses to communicate whether your head's down or not. You can see my buddy Julio here has a pretty hilarious Slack status. That was, I think, yesterday. But how do we make sure that everyone is on the same page in order to continue to do the work efficiently? So this may mean that you need to set up some new meeting types. We have a meeting standing now called Collaboration Time, where for an hour during the day, we are committed to being on video with each other inside of Miro, whiteboarding as necessary so that we can keep making progress. When at work, we would just, nudge each other and say, come over here, I gotta ask you a question. But kind of setting up the processes there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Miro team, and we're just going to do some exercises on how we can set up our team norms together. And they're going to walk us through some different ways that we can use the tool.
Thank you so much, Breyna. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Can you guys see it okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, it's so nice to be here with Frog. Thanks so much for the really awesome section on design sprints specifically for these new remote times, Breyna. So my name is Iris. I'm working at Miro right now, focusing on customer insights and building out that function. And I also have my colleague Kevin here. You want to introduce yourself, Kevin?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Kevin. I'm on the customer success side, so I help with adoption and training for all the folks using us here at Miro.
Awesome. So for the next half of this workshop, we're actually going to do a little bit of an introduction and then just dive straight into workshopping. Breyna mentioned a few things about setting the stage, reading the energy of the room, right? We're going to actually get hands-on and do some of those activities together. So briefly, before we hop in, for those of you who joined us earlier this week, this might be a little bit of a refresher. But I just wanted to introduce Miro as this online collaborative whiteboarding platform. Breyna, you mentioned that it kind of takes the place of the team room. Really, our goal is to be that whiteboard where you can create that that collaborative space together with your colleagues. So I'll quickly play this video. This is something we'll see in action in just a minute, but I wanted to show the experience of synchronously working on a whiteboard together. So there is the synchronous collaboration, which is what you see right here. And there's also the asynchronous collaboration. So as you're working through your design sprint, there will be times where you're working together, right, really heads down and focusing, but you need it to be able to connect to the bigger picture and carry it through in task form, in project form, so it doesn't just live in one place on the board. So it really supports that synchronous as well as the asynchronous collaboration. We also call this a infinite canvas. So I'm going to quickly zoom out so you can see we actually have a lot of space to create content. Just gave you a little sneak peek of what's to come. But really what we want to be able to do is give you some of those tools so that you can run your own sprints and be able to use Miro boards together with other digital tools to really run those sprints successfully. Really briefly, ideation and brainstorming is really supported through Miro. The experience of being able to take a sticky, place it somewhere, add your thoughts, right? You have the ability to add tags to really track where they're coming from or assign people to different tasks as well. And there's also different ways to engage with sticky notes using emojis, for example. So just a really great way to get ideas on a board together. There's a few tools like the timer and the voting tool as well that are really supportive of that. Agile workflows is another one, being able to map out dependencies using some of our templates that Kevin will touch on later on to really set up those rituals like retrospectives, like PI planning sessions, like Kanban boards, so that you really can move projects from start to finish. And then lastly, what we're going to be focusing on mostly today is, of course, the design sprint, the research and design use case, which allows people to really get those thoughts onto a board together and really work as a team and collaborate as a team. And you're going to see Kevin's actually on the board. I can kind of follow him around if I like. I can also, if I want to, turn the collaborator's cursor off to kind of limit distractions. So that really is up to you to decide how you want to be engaging with your board at any given time. So really briefly, before I hand it off to Kevin, let's take a quick poll. And if you just go ahead and open the chat, and I think Kevin, you can see the chat. What's the hardest part about running a design sprint? And we can go remote or in person, doesn't matter. Let's just run the gamut. What's the hardest part for you about running a design sprint? We'll wait for some of those responses to trickle in.
Yeah, we have about a 20-second delay, so we'll wait for the responses to come in and share some live.
No worries. And again, they can be remote issues or pain points about running design sprints in person. Just wondering what the experience is of this group.
Yeah, so far from the group, we're getting responses by getting stakeholders aligned with the activities, keeping folks engaged, not solutionizing during the design sprints, being remotely facilitating, scoping so far, being the only designer on the team. Scope is coming up again, and also keeping folks engaged after a few long discussions. So lots of good feedback coming from the group.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. So definitely some themes around aligning. I like the solutionizing, right? Not jumping ahead too much. And then some ideas around, again, that remote experience as well. Right, Kevin, you want to take it away and tell us a little bit about facilitation?
Yeah, so what I'll be talking about today is just some of the tools that we use at Miro. So things that you guys can do during your design sprints, things like setting the stage using our tool, having icebreakers together within Miro, organizing your content with things like frames and templates, doing some dot voting. And we have a pretty cool sticky capture tool where you can get some analog stickies and move them onto your digital whiteboard. So for the first example, this is just a quick breakdown of how your workshop and your design sprint can be structured. So we have our title area. We have different frames that serve as workspaces for the different teams and different participants. You can section off different activities, give them detailed instructions on how to participate. And obviously we have a section in the beginning for icebreakers, or you can kind of add them to specific sections as you see fit. So it doesn't always have to be the beginning. It could kind of come organically for feedback and things like that. So we also have a section here for group and activities, but this is just a framework. Let me show you one of our templates that is just pre-built so that you don't have to make it on your own. So a lot of different parts. We're not going to cover everything, but this is available to you in our template library. And we've done some research. We got participants from a lot of our customer base as well. And this is a good example of how you might set something up. So what is the design sprint, the structure, some guidelines, and everything is time boxed. And we have some tools like the visual timer to keep you guys on track. Cool, but this is available to anybody in our templates right now. So moving back to the next section, this is an example of our stickies capture. I think Iris can play this quick video so you get an idea. But yeah, basically you can use this with stickies or even something like a flip chart. You can take a photo from your mobile and then just bring them into Miro, and we'll turn them into those stickies that you can interact with. So you see the photo on the left, and then right below it, all the stickies that were converted. And then the video is starting to play a little bit.
Is it lagging a little bit? Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's no problem. So cool. That's all I had to share about the tools. Just moving on to takeaways. I think Iris can take that over.
Yeah, for sure. So just to hit on some things that Kevin mentioned and some ideas that we have about how to get your design sprints up and running, making sure that you set up your board beforehand. So this really plays into being intentional, right? Who are the people that are going to be in the room, thinking about how to guide them from activity to activity, really time boxing like Kevin mentioned, and making sure that you're kind of moving forward and kind of reading the energy in the room throughout. Using templates, super powerful. We have the one that we just showed for the design sprint. There's another template that just came out, also design sprints. I believe this was just added yesterday. I have a little bit of a slow connection, so I'm not going to bring it up. But if you search for design sprints in our templates bucket, you'll find some other really great tools for you. And you can always build your own custom templates as well. Some thoughts as well for really setting the stage and getting people aligned, setting how-tos ahead of time, and then also using the visual notes feature, which is right over here, to kind of set up to-do lists or set up pre-homework so that people know kind of how to get up to speed before we all meet together for the sprint. Lastly, we're going to actually do this in just a moment, is inviting folks as guest editors onto your board. So Kevin is going to actually grab a link to an activity that we have to invite everyone on the board to join us on this activity. So we just have a few activities here listed. And Kevin and Breyna and I will all kind of chat through and debrief once we complete this. But we'd love to get folks on the board and just answer this simple question at first. Just take a moment to check in with yourself and how are you feeling? And if you can take the dot from over here on the right side and kind of just check your own energy. So since we're not in the same room together right now, it's really difficult for me to read the energy in the room, right? But if we have tools like Miro that allow us to kind of run certain workshops like this, we can actually ask people to answer questions like these. So folks who are jumping onto the board, we actually have a frame right over here. So if you scroll to the right, yeah, I see some folks are finding me. And also if you click in the top, you'll be able to see Kevin's image. If you click on his image, it'll bring you to where he is on the board right over here. So check in with yourself. How are you feeling? I'm going to set a quick timer. Again, using that time boxing feature. Oh, thanks, Kevin, pointing people in the right direction. And I'm going to set this to 3 minutes. And let's go ahead and see if we can get some folks to plot themselves along the matrix. High energy, low energy, balanced, overwhelmed. Kind of low energy today. I'll put myself down here. Oh, thank you, Kevin. So Kevin's showing in real time, getting folks to the right place on the board, using some awesome arrows and direction. This is great. And just another example, I have my cursor view turned on right now in my screen share. So it's really great to kind of see folks answering the question in real time. And if it does get too noisy, for example, if you wanted to kind of hide those cursors, you can always do that. So I would just do that this way, and then it would be a little bit more of a private space. Another quick note about this activity is it's really low barrier to entry. So if you do set up your boards beforehand with dots like we did here, really all you have to do is drag and drop. So you're not creating any new content. So if this is your first time on the board, it's again, lower barrier to entry. So there's not too much to have to learn before you can actually participate. So if you are thinking about setting up your boards and setting up activities, setting up ones that don't require too much prior knowledge of the tool beforehand can actually really help to promote that immediate collaboration, even with new users. All right, we have about 1.5 minutes left, and I see folks are still answering the question. And Kevin and Breyna, I'd love for you to maybe hop in and see what you're seeing or comment on anything that you're noticing as far as setting up an activity like this one before a longer design sprint.
Yeah, I love this activity. I think one of the things that has been really helpful for our teams, and we've done some of this with our clients as well, is just doing this periodically. So doing this not only at the beginning of a sprint or the beginning of a project, but doing this maybe every sprint or every other sprint to really check in with the team. Again, because we don't see them face to face, we can't read their energy, we can't see their facial expression sometimes, or we can't see what they're dealing with in their home, how chaotic that it may be. So I love this, just being able to check in with everyone and giving everyone a chance to kind of speak up and explain why they put their dot where they have, so that we can get a better read, right, of the energy and figure out how to accommodate those people as we continue to make work going forward.
I love that extra addition. And so that's just a great example, Breyna, of taking an activity and really making it your own. So if you do have a smaller group where everyone can share, for example, that's so great. Oh, the timer is up. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Thank you everyone so much for participating in the first one. Kevin, I don't know if we want to just move into the next one or if there are any questions coming up in the chat that we want to look at.
Yeah, one question just specific to this one was what do we do with the information about how folks are feeling? Is there anything that we can make actionable? I think on our side, just to quickly answer that, we use it to gauge the engagement in real time before the meeting starts. So kind of on the fly, if you're seeing that everybody has some low energy, we might steer clear from going through detailed documentation or maybe even split up some parts of your design sprint. So if you know you have time later in the day or early in the next day in the morning, maybe shift some more intensive activities to when people have more energy.
Awesome. All right, let's scroll down to the next one. Kevin, do you want to lead us through this true or false activity?
Yeah, this is just an example of a way you can kind of have something really lighthearted on your agenda. So maybe this isn't for every meeting that's critical, but this is just a true or false section. You can use dot voting. You can even use emojis if you want to. But I've listed a bunch of true or false questions, and then we'll give everybody, let's say, 30 seconds to answer these 5 true or false questions.
Ooh, okay, we got 30 seconds. So we're testing out the time boxing hardcore here. So if everyone can just scroll down to the next frame below. Yeah, I see a lot of folks have already found their way here. I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds, and you can just set up, the true or false, depending on the statement.
Yep.
Shall I go ahead and do it? All right, 30 seconds. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome.
You guys are quick. I like it.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And then while we're waiting, one of the top questions that have come up so far, this is a question for everybody on the panel. What's the ideal team to get involved in a design sprint?
That's a great idea. That's a great question. So I will say for us at Frog, we usually have a two, I think it's like 2 or 3 developers to 1 designer ratio. And so we are, design heavy, right? We have a lot of design resources that we can leverage. And so, for example, for me, the last project that I've been working on, we have an interaction designer, a visual designer, a experience analyst who's helping us kind of track requirements, and then a program manager and myself. And so that is 5 people kind of communicating back and forth with our team. We have, 4-person teams all the way up to, gosh, I want to say, I think there's like a 18-person sprint team right now running multiple tracks of work. And so it kind of varies. For us, again, we're spoiled with having multiple designers on a program and kind of bolstering that design rationale. I've definitely worked on the other side, being the only designer and working with a lot of developers, but I'd say that is kind of the ideal, like 4 to 5 people on the responsible for the design that is then communicating that over to the development team.
Awesome. Cool. So this activity is done with. If you guys want to know the answers, I can post them later. I'll share a couple now, though. Twinkies don't have an infinite shelf life. If you cry in space, the tears will stick to your face. And if you cut an earthworm in half, only one side grows, not both halves. And we'll save the other 2 for later.
I got all of those wrong. I got 0 for 3. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
Me too.
Thanks so much, Kevin and Breyna. Again, just an example of getting folks into the room, into the space, used to using a tool so that there's not that anxiety around, learning how to use Miro. It can be, just starting small, moving a dot from one place to the other, and even just play a game like this that'll, introduces new ideas and conversation. All right, so now that you are all Miro pros, we're gonna scoot down to the next question that we were hoping that we could explore together. So what are some ways to drive remote engagement? And so I'm sure that you have thoughts that you came into the workshop with already, some things that Breyna maybe introduced, or Kevin and I, and we have some stickies over here to the right that you can drag and add to the board. But you're also welcome to try adding your own sticky notes, exploring the bulk mode function. So if you click on sticky note, there is a bulk mode option as well. You can change the color of your sticky note. You can add emojis. So I'm gonna set a timer. What should we do? Should we do 2 minutes? Is that good, you guys?
Yeah, I think 2 minutes is good. We have about 10 minutes left or so.
Perfect. We'll go ahead and hit start. We'll give everyone 2 minutes.
Cool. And then while we're waiting for everybody, let's go to one of the next questions that was pretty popular. So what's the most suitable scope to apply design sprints, and when should we avoid design sprints?
Great question.
Breyna, do you have some feedback? Or I have a little bit to talk about now, but I think internally, at least for us, we roll out design sprints for something more complicated. If it's something that can be fixed relatively easy, we'll skip it. But we try to apply it in a lot of cases just because we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence. But Breyna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, for us, usually we are partnering with our clients to launch something new. So most of the time when we're using design sprints, we're using it to launch a brand new product. And so we know that we have a large amount of features to tackle. Usually, we're managing this large backlog. And so it comes in handy when we can kind of look at that backlog and kind of bite off chunks of work. Now, when it comes to, let's say, like a 1.0 or another release or a bug fix, I agree, maybe like a one-off bug fix doesn't really need to be kind of packaged into this design sprint. But yeah, I mean, and I'll also say, I think we usually use it more in detail design. We don't use it as much if we're doing design research or doing kind of high-level concepting. We really use it when we're getting into the nitty-gritty details, making sure that we're capturing all of the states necessary in order to launch a functioning product.
Awesome. So about 10 seconds left for everybody.
I'm already seeing some really great thoughts here that I might even steal for myself. And I also see folks who are kind of experimenting with what the tool can actually do. So that's great.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Some emojis, some shapes. I love this. Ask non-work related questions, which I always feel like that kind of tricks people into collaborating better. You kind of do something that you don't think is related to work, and then suddenly it seems that it is related. So I think that's a really powerful one. Kevin, Breyna, I don't know if you see any favorites here that you want to call out. Some really great ideas.
I love that one as well. I've noticed that since being at home, especially because you'll just see funny things happening in people's backgrounds or funny photos posted on their wall. It's fun to be able to, get to share more of life with people. And I know some people want to be a little bit more private, and that's totally fine as well. But I think it's helped kind of lighten the mood of this experience that we're all sharing in together and getting a chance to kind of see a little bit more of life. I know one of the guys on my team has 3 kids, and I'll get on a call with him, and it sounds like someone's arm got chopped off. So, having just being real about what life looks like and getting to share that together, I think really helps people feel more comfortable and more understood as we do this work together.
That's great.
Cool. I think some folks got started already on the next section. We have 7 minutes left, but one question to you, Breyna, from the audience, specifically to Frog's workflow. Do you include UX researchers in the planning phase with the PM, or do you have a separate workflow altogether?
So that's a good question. So it kind of depends on what kind of research we're doing. I will say some of our studios do have dedicated design researchers, but for the most part, Frog as a whole has trained all of our designers, some of our developers, our PMs, all to be great researchers and go into the field and conduct research themselves. And so because of that, we're not having to engage kind of a separate department in order to bring them in as a resource on a project. We're all kind of doing that process together. And so if we are kind of more in an exploratory phase, that'll be scoped outside of a sprint. But if we're doing, let's say, kind of periodic validation testing, we'll do that within the sprint. And so we'll have either an interaction designer or a visual designer kind of take lead on developing a discussion guide, what kind of questions we want to ask, what goals we want to get out of it, and then just do it kind of really ad hoc, kind of quick and dirty. Sometimes it's in person if we have that luxury, but a lot of times it's just remote and sharing our screen and getting some feedback that we can kind of design off of and make improvements off of.
Awesome, great point. And then one more question just from the audience in general. So actually, let me find that question again. Okay, so when we're onboarding just new team members that maybe aren't familiar with the sprint process or culture, and they don't have experience with just our general processes in general, what's the onboarding experience like? So I think I can start there. So for us, we do some training around design thinking in general, and we do it with non-designers throughout our team. So for us, we host a separate, like, what is design thinking before we actually get into specific workshops, and then walk them through some of the education, how to get educated on your own, and try to just walk them through baby steps, provide them videos and resources. So we're pretty intentional about making sure people are aware of how we conduct things in-house, and then just generally how other companies are doing design thinking, or in this case, design sprints.
Yeah, we do something similar as well. We have a kind of a discipline lead give an overview of each discipline as someone joins Frog. And so they'll get an hour-long session with that person. They walk through kind of what that discipline means. And some of that may involve sprints, right? And so once someone gets on a program, we usually give them about a week or two to kind of just shadow what's going on before they're responsible for actually executing the work. So they really get to understand kind of who the client is, what the work is, and what our processes are going to look like. How quickly are we going to develop? What are we delivering at the end of the sprint before they're kind of obligated to jump in and get some work done.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We have about 4 minutes left. As Kevin mentioned, there is a section on leaving feedback for the workshop too. And if you're going through and seeing ideas or things that you agree with, you can always hover above the sticky note and add an emoji too. So if you wanted to go in, that's one way that we do kind of informal voting internally at Miro, which really is another great way to read the room. And then I just wanted to, as folks are completing the final activity, just call attention to the fact that we went through 4 activities together. One was around reading the energy of the room, which we were able to do remotely. It kind of looks like we're all over the board, right? But that's just good for us to know as facilitators, as folks leading people through a process, just to know what the energy feels like. We did kind of a non-work related activity that just gets folks used to using the tool and kind of thinking about it creatively. Another activity that was more around brainstorming, sharing ideas, maybe informally voting on them as well. And then taking that to the next step by maybe voting on these ideas so that they turn into projects or steps later. And then finally, running retrospectives directly in the meeting. I do think this comes into play during design sprints as well, just to make sure that it can be an iterative process so that folks are really achieving their goals over time. So again, thank you so much for going through these different activities with us. We have about 2 minutes left. Kevin, Breyna, any last thoughts that you wanted to share with the group?
I would just say thanks for joining us today. I know it was a little bit of a shorter session and we didn't get to dig deep into what design sprints are look like. I'd say look out for some material on product delivery and product realization that's going to come out from Frog in the next about month. You'll see some information about that coming from Christina and Sean Rhodes and a few other frogs. So look for that. Again, just thank you for joining us, and feel free to reach out to myself on LinkedIn or on the Slack channel as it still stands today if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, and then there was one question also related to that, or what are design sprints in our definition, and if we had any more detailed information on it. So we do have the template that we shared that walks you through step by step each phase in the design sprint. So we'll make sure we share some resources out too for folks that want to look at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
That was incredible. Thank you. Thanks a ton, Breyna, and all the other folks from Frog that participated this week and shared some incredible ways of adapting to this new normal. And of course, our friends at Miro. So big thanks, Iris and Kevin, once again for joining us today. Also massive thanks, Kevin, for also plugging in the questions, and helping others that are just watching the live stream.